Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do something a little different than I've done before. We're going to learn how to take this pile of wood and turn it into one of these. Now I take all the credit in building it, but very little credit in planning it. This plan actually comes from AnnaWhite.com. That's A-N-A hyphen, like the minus sign, White, W-H-I-T-E.com. If you go to her plans section, she has a ton of awesome plans to build all kinds of things, inside the house, outside the house. There's a lot on there, so just bear with me here. In the very beginning, the battery to my camera was dead, and I had to charge it, so I don't do a whole lot of filming on the cutting. But if you look on the plans, the cutting is pretty self-explanatory. So grab yourself the parts that you need. You know, all the lumber, the full list, hit the hardware store, pick it all up, bring it back. I built two of these, and the first one, a friend of mine and I built in about a day. We built most of it, then he left, and I ate some dinner, and then we finished it up. But the second one I built entirely by myself, and it took about, I think, a total of 7 hours, start to finish. I'm nowhere near an expert, but that's about what it took. When you're cutting these 20 and 13/16 lengths, you can cut your one side. What I did is I take one piece that I've already cut, I set it up against here, I make sure this end is flush, and I take my pencil and I mark this end. Save this piece that you marked it with. You want to mark every piece with the same piece, because if you happen to cut this one just a little bit long, and then you use that to mark your next piece, and then you cut that one a little bit long and you use that to mark your next piece, you can see where this will end up as a problem. If you use the same piece over and over, your tiny error will at least be the same. When you cut this, you mark your line, you go out and you cut it. That will make your ends, let's see if I can get this in here, parallel. This one goes out, this one comes in, they're parallel. When you cut your 10 and 3/8, you cut your one end, flip it over, and you cut your 10 and 3/8 spot. That way you don't have to keep moving your saw back and forth. So when you're cutting your parallel ones, the longer ones, cut, cut. When you're cutting your shorter ones, cut, and then flip. And then when I make this cut here, which is already marked, I'll cut that, and then I'll flip it. And I'll set that piece on top of it, mark my line, cut it, flip it, and I'll run out of board, but you get the point. Let's keep cutting. I had a hard time finding 2x3s and pressure treated, which is everything I'm using here. So all I bought was traditional pressure treated 2x4s. You see here, just a regular 2x4. And then got out the circular saw, since I don't have a table saw. Put the guide in, got the guide at 2.5 inches, because a 2x3 is actually 2.5, 1.5 by 2.5. So to cut the 4 down to a 3, quote unquote, I set this to 2.5, did a little test cut, and measured over just to make sure my guide was right. It is 2.5, and set it up on some, see if I can turn this here. Set it up on some guides here, just some scrap wood, a couple pieces set on there, and set the blade depth so that it is just a little bit deeper than here, than the 2x4, so that it'll cut through, barely touch this. This doesn't even move even though it's cutting through it, because it's just barely touching it. Puts a little seam in it. It's scrap wood, doesn't matter. And I rip down the whole thing so I get a 2x3. When you're finished, you get something that, when you're finished, you get something that looks like that. You can see here the edges they made are kind of rounded, and the edges I made are pretty square, but it doesn't matter. I've done this once before and it worked out just fine. Let's get to cutting. All right, we're going to talk about a couple pointers, if you will, mistakes I made or started to make on the first one I built and some I made on this one that I built. These are the, let's see here, these are the 20 and 3/16, or I'm sorry, 13/16 board 1x2s. The mistake I made on this one is I did not look at the instructions the second time around. I thought I remembered. These are 20 and 13/16 from this point, I'm sorry, from this point to this point. To this edge, not to this point. They're longer than 20 and 13/16 point to point. I thought I remembered that these are shorter. The 10-inch ones, the 10 and 3/8 are 10 and 3/8 at their longest. The next thing I'm going to tell you is make sure all of these are facing the same way, the long ones, and then when you put these on here, they'll actually fit together. If you did one backward like that and glued them on, they don't line up, they don't fit together. So you can do, if the board looks better backwards, just make sure you do another one backwards to match it. That's all. But I found it easiest. I'm staining mine, so it doesn't really matter. I just do them all the same way. So we'll get them all put together and we'll pick back up from there. Well, first let me say, I'll apologize. My outfit is not amazingly awesome because it's, well, it's late at night, 4th of July, so you hear some explosions. That's the fireworks, hopefully. All the lumber at this point is cut. I've made the X's at this point, and we're going to continuing on the steps, so hopefully I can get a little more video for you. So I figure now is as good a time as any to tell you all the products that I use throughout this build. Probably first one here is just the Tight Bond 2 wood glue. Most of the joints, not all of them, but most of the connections where it's getting screwed or nailed or fastened in some way gets at least a little bit, sometimes a little bit more of this on it. All the screws that I'm using, this is just my local hardware store's brand, but it's basically, I don't know if it'll focus on that. Basically it's a 2.5-inch outdoor wood screw. They're ceramic coated. They're self-drilling. So we can get a screw out of here. And you're probably not going to see it, but the head of, or the tip of this has a little drill bit kind of built into it, so it drills. Each of the thread has little spirals in it, so it spits the wood out. It's supposed to help limit splitting. The underside of the head itself has rivets in it, so it's supposed to countersink. And it's also a star drive, which they give you the bit. It's supposed to grip better, which I really like. I've built a lot of projects with it. 1 pound box would probably build this whole thing. I got several, I'm building a couple of these assemblies plus some other things, so I bought a 5 pound box. Other products I'm using, finish nails. Sorry to walk over here. Just typical, I think this is big orange, I think, maybe not. 3D finish nails, they're 1.25 inches long. 1 pound box, plenty. I think this will do both of my couches that I'm building here. I bought, we'll leave the brand name out of it, but you can see here it's orange in color. Just some simple carpenter pencils. These are not attached. Yeah, we have the X here. These were already put together. One thing I didn't say when I was building these, you see an individual component is the long board and then the 2 short boards. When you're putting these 2 short boards on here, take even a scrap piece, but any piece of something by 2. I just would grab another one of these until I got to the end. Put it in between there, because if it hangs over a little bit, you can always sand it down, but if you get them too close together, then it won't fit. So put a little piece in between there, get it all lined up, glue it, and then nail it, and then pull that piece out and let it set. These have set overnight. Not that that needs to happen because the first one I built, I pretty much just kept going. But I'm not going to bore you. Essentially, I'm going to glue these and use those 2.5 inch screws to fix them together. I'm going to tell you right now, you can use the pocket hole set if you really want to be fancy. I'm not a big fan on this part. I just run the 2.5 inch screw through. So we'll get those put together and check back with you. Well, we got our 2x2 12 1/8 boards attached to the side of the X pieces here. And just to show you, you can see, well, maybe you can see, they're all glued. This one didn't get glued as much, but they're all glued, and then these are 2.5 inch, those deck screws run straight through. The next step is the 2x3s, 23 inches long. Get attached to the top and the bottom with approximately a 1 inch overhang. And those, it says on the site, the best way that Anna found was through the pocket holes. So I'm going to get the pocket hole jig set up and show you how I do that, just in case you're not familiar. So here we go. To start off, So to start off, I set approximately 1 inch on each side. I found that when I make these, they don't come out to be the exact 21 inches, or don't always come out to be the exact 21 inches they're meant to be, which would give you 1 inch overhang on each side. This one I found is actually about, it's about 20 3/4, which means I got a little bit, I got about 1/8 or so on each side on top of my inch. Turns out that actually it's about, that's a little over 1/8, but I ended up centering it on here so I got an even gap on both sides, and then I just draw on the 2x3 an arrow pointing up the direction I want the screw to go, so I can then take this off and put it in the jig. I'll show you that this is the jig. I try and use this one as much as possible because using the clamp is a little harder to drill because I don't have a table. As you can see, I'm working on the floor here. But we'll get it clamped in there and I'll show you how that goes. So I get the jig down here. For this, we're going to set this height on here to 1.5 inches. Tighten that back down. Then we're going to take the board and line that up with B the best we can. That's hole B in the jig. And get the arm of our clamp set up there. That worked out well. We'll get our drill switched out and get to drilling. Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you here. I haven't used this jig enough to really know the ins and outs. I would say I'm only semi-proficient. But I found this works, trial and error, so to each their own, I guess. This is the drill bit that comes with the Craig jig or Creek jig. I've got it set at the 1.5 inch stop location, which my understanding was the screw length. We're using 2.5 inch screws. I could be wrong there. I recommend reading the manual and watching some videos. However, I've got this block set up at 1.5 inches as well, and it's clamped down in there. When you drill this, you'll notice that, I don't know if you'll see it on the camera here, but the drill bit actually comes in from the top. It is not cutting into the side of the board, it's going from the top, which isn't really truly a pocket hole, but at least it's giving you the angle. I found it works great. It's covered up by the top 1x2 piece that's going on later, and really puts it in there well. So get a few of these drilled out and we'll go. The only thing else I can recommend is if you bought the professional kit, I think that's what this is called, it comes with this little guy. It actually attaches on the back here, and it's a vacuum attachment, either holding a shop vac or putting that attachment on, it's highly recommended because you're boring out a good amount of wood, and it kind of makes a mess. But you saw this garage right now, you'll see I've got a big mess anyway, and I'm going to clean it up here in a little bit. So we're going to drill this hole, and we'll see what it looks like. You can see it takes it, I take it right down to the stop. I ream it in and out a couple times just to get all those sawdust out and everything. But you pull that out. And normally I would unclamp and go right to the next one, but just to show you. See, it's kind of in the top of the board there. But this gets a cap on top of it, so you can't even see. There's a little bit in the back, but you can barely see it. Covers it up, hides it actually pretty well, and it puts you at a good angle to tap into your other piece. So I'm going to do the rest of these and just keep moving. So I've got one set completely drilled out, bottom to here, top to here, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. But I wanted to just show you the benefit of having two drills, which I don't have that benefit. I could either set up all these boards and drill all the holes, which I would normally do, but for this video I want to show you, if you have a second drill, you could have one of these set up with the screws and one of them set up with the bit. But the other reason I want to show you is I couldn't find, nor would, after doing this, would I even recommend the 2.5-inch Kreg pocket screws. They would probably be a little better than these because they have a flat head, or sorry, a pan head instead of this tapered head. But I used these on the last ones because I couldn't find 2.5-inch pocket screws. These work just fine. The one thing I did run into is the provided tip does run into a bit of a length issue on some of these, but it's not too bad on these where I'm coming from the top. Yeah. You see, I did not pull tight because these run in that they're a little bit short. So I found if I get it out as far as I can safely go without being wobbly, I can usually get them in there far enough. There we go. Pulled down tight. Come over and do this one. There it is. The one thing I will warn you, if you use these screws instead of pocket screws, the thread on these is pretty aggressive. And this pressure treated lumber is pretty soft, so you have the ability to drive right through it. So don't do that. When you'll feel it when it snugs down tight. Just go a little bit further, make sure it's set in there, and you're good to go. Now you see. This one I'm going to back off a little bit because, maybe, there we go. This board was a little long. I probably should have sanded it down. I didn't, just generally out of laziness. So, because it teeters it off like that, I'm going to loosen it up a little bit so I can get this one run in. You hear a difference in the drill there, hopefully, that you'll know when it's actually snugging it down. And there you go. I can't. There you go. Very well fixed together and ain't going nowhere. So I use those screws, like I said, through most of the project. I bought a few of the 1.25 inch, 1.5 Kreg, whatever it is, screws. I'm sure I'll use them, but once I run out, I probably won't buy more, just because the benefit to them is that they're a flat on the bottom of the head, so it gives you a nice gripping surface. But The other things that go better than just a typical panhead is they are self-drilling so that they don't split your wood. But so are these. So if it's not a crucial binding two pieces of wood together part of the project, they're not really necessary, in my opinion. Do as you want. I didn't record this next part because I figured it's pretty self-explanatory. The same pieces that we put the 2x3s on with the pocket holes also get a 1x2 23 inches wide on the top. All I did was glue it and put in some finish nails. Looks like about 7 nails just to make sure it's in there, it's firm. Finish nails are good for kind of holding things in place while the glue sets up. And the nails stay obviously, but they're not real good at holding down like a nail with a big head on it. But they do a good job. The next step, I wanted to film this part, is putting the legs on it because I like to do it upside down. So that same piece I just did, put the 1x2 on top, flip it upside down so that I can put the legs on. And the legs obviously going to go on just like this. One thing I'm going to point out at this point, kind of everything I've been doing flat on the ground. And the reason for that is that gives you a flat face. You can either make that your back or your front. I like to make it the front so that everyone sees the front for the most part. And when you sit against it, it's not all uneven. It's pretty close to flat. So when you put some of these boards up against here, you know, 1x2 and a 2x3 and all that different sizes. They're supposed to be the same, but they're not. So I try and make whatever side is flat, make all of that flat. So this clearly has I don't know if you can see it, this has a gap here. This is quote unquote my back. So as I put this 2x2 up against here, you can see the 2x3 is a little wider. I try and make it as close to flush as possible with the front. So I'm going to get my glue again, put a little glue on there, a couple 2.5 inch screws this way, and run them in on both sides and go from there. Yeah, originally I said I work on these upside down, which the first time we built them, we did. I had someone to hold it as I put the screws in and the glue on. Clearly here tonight I'm working by myself, so I found an easier way is if you put it on its side, scoot back a little bit here, put it on its side, square up the end, and then glue and screw, or I'm sorry, put it on its side, glue it, then square, put it on, square it, and screw it. That's a lot easier. I tried to do it by myself, standing up, and the boards were falling over, so do it sideways. I'm getting ready to do the second one here. And if you're going to do it on its side, remember that where the top is, because you don't want it to become your bottom, which won't work. So, get my legs situated here, take off the junk. Grab my glue. Like I said, remember where the top is, and also remember which side is your flush side. Which for you is the camera, and this towards the camera is the flush side for me. So I'm going to put my glue on. Set my board on here for a minute. Kind of square it up by my fingers. And of course my square is sitting over here. I don't have a normal square here, so I'm just going to use a speed square. Make sure that that is flush there. One screw. Here. adjust my stupidity there. Run a few screws in. I'll do 2 on top, 2 on the bottom. Yep, of course we split the board there. Going a little bit too fast. Doesn't seem to be structurally unsound, just split the board a little bit, but you get the idea here. We get one side done, we flip it over. Another point where it's crucial to make sure this is your top, and now this side is your flat face or your flush side. So when you put your board on, you put your glue on. Put your board on. You don't want to put it on this way, obviously that would be a problem. I'm not sure, I know why, but I'm not a big fan of the staples they put in this thing. Flush it up, flush it up. We'll pressure on it. I guess we'll try this side of the screw this time, so it's not teetering. Sawdust. The first one I put in, I don't typically run all the way down, because if it's not all the way tight, then I got a little more wiggle room to adjust the rest. But once I get those in, I'll usually run that down in last. Get the rest. Pull these in. These 1x2s are a little prone to split on me. I did this before and it didn't split on me at all, but like I said, pretty strong there. So, on to the next step. Next step is a 2x6. In between here is a support, and from the ground to the top of the 2x6. So as this is in here, up to this point. Oh, sorry, you probably can't see that. Up to this point over here. Nice. Up to this point is 13 inches. So I usually measure up my board 13 inches, put a line, same thing over here, put a line, wedge the board in there, put my level on it just to make sure, and then screw it in. No glue on this one, it's just going to have 3 or 4 screws on each side to support it. So, plus wedging it in there with glue, it tends to just shear off the glue. So this part of the process is definitely the most tedious, probably the most time consuming. I'm going to try and record the whole thing, or at least get the basis of it. Basically, this is the whole back piece. And as I told you earlier, these tend to not be exactly the same size, at least with my abilities or inabilities. So I measured all 3 of those, plus I measured these 2x2s, which are supposed to be 1.5. This one's like 1 1/4, this one is 1.5. So I added all that together, took that total and subtracted it from the 72 inches that this piece is. It gave me a total of 7 inches, and you get a gap on the front, in between these 2 boards, in between these 2 boards, and on that side. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you make it the 1 inch gap that is requested or suggested. Since I'm having battery issues, I'm just, I didn't record this whole thing, but I'm going to walk you through what we did here. As you can see, we've got, this is the top, we've got pocket holes all along there, all the way along. Same thing in the 2x3s on the bottom. And same thing in the 2x6. Now I have a confession to make. My kit, my Krieg, whatever kit, came with 10 2.5 inch pocket screws. So I use those on this part because as I stand this up, it tends to be a little flimsy, especially between the 2x6, because it's just 2 screws holding that whole board for now. So I will tell you, if you can find the 2.5-inch pocket hole screws, they are better. I would just look at prices and figure it out. Could I have used the other ones? Yes. Will this work, or would it have worked without these? Yes. These just tend to be a little bit better. That being said, I measured it all out. It looks like I'm not perfectly centered, but should be close enough. So we're going to move on to the next step. I hope you guys figured out. The one thing I'm missing here is there is a 1x2 that goes on top, helps hide those pocket hole screw holes. But I'm going to tack that on in the end here once we get this set up. So we'll be right back. Alright, so we got the legs attached, and that 2x6 on the ground is just sitting on the ground. But legs are attached, and the next thing to go on is that front. Now this is a spot where I recommend 2 people, because it's a lot easier to do. If you don't have 2 people, if that's not an option, I can tell you what I do and try and describe it, which is what I'm doing here because I'm by myself. I'm going to take my 2.5-inch screws and run them in, let's see if I can do this here, from this board in through the 2x2 leg, and just get it so about that much of the tip sticks out on both sides, and then kind of use those as little pinchers to hold it in place. I'm going to hold it in place and then try and level it at the same time. So it's a little tough, but it works pretty well if you're by yourself. Okay, so I got the front brace on, or the front piece on. It's all leveled up. The last few steps here are pretty easy. We got to put this, that's in the picture there, yeah, 2-inch by 2-inch cleat on the front and another one on the back. That's to support the runners that are going to go in between there. I found the easiest way is if you take your 2.5-inch screws and run about 3 or so of them in, one on each end and one about in the middle. And then I like the idea that Anna did the back cleat is about 1.5 inches down, and the front cleat is about 3/4 of an inch down. That way it gives you just a very, very slight decline towards the back. So as you sit in it, it's a little more comfortable and relaxing. So I'm gonna run my screws in, and we'll be wrapping up. Okay, we got our cleat in the back, got our cleat in the front, and as you can see, at least I hope you can see, this gap here is, if I measure well, it's about 3/4 of an inch, and in the back, this gap here is about 1.5 inches. So they should sit back a little bit to help keep the bugs away. But we'll see. I don't know. Nothing less. That's what I had to use because that's all I could get. Now the other side to that is these 1x3s on the cedar is actually 7/8 by 3s. I think they're made for something specific. I'm not sure what, but in essence, last but not least are the slats. Couple things I recommend. One is making a spacer so that these go in quickly. I have to look at the instructions. I don't remember what size the gap is, but whatever it is, I'd cut a spacer that size so you can stick it in there, nail it down, and then go to the next one. The other thing I recommend is these are supposed to be 1x3s. I could not find 1x3s pressure treated, so I ended up spending a little more money, and I got 1x3s cedar. Does a couple things. One, it's a good quality wood, but two, I'm hoping that 1x3s and cedar right underneath where you're sitting will do it. They're literally just going to sit in here, and then I use a couple finished nails just to hold it in place. Otherwise they might get bunched in one side and your seat cushion falls through. Last but not least, I think the instructions say these are 23 inches. From my first attempt, I found that that's too big. I don't know if it's just because I don't measure well, or if it's because it's not truly square, but on both of these, 22.5s were a lot better. Obviously, you've got a little wiggle room, but we're going to get these in and I'll show you a final product. Well, there you have it. Put our slats in, nailed them down. I put 4 nails per board, two nails each side. And she's done. Do a quick walk around. This is no way, shape, or form perfect. I don't pretend to be a professional carpenter, which is kind of to the point of, you know, you can do this. You don't have to be a professional carpenter to make this work. You can get her done. You can see, you know, I don't think this one is was cut as meticulously as I did the first one. You can see, hopefully maybe, yeah, back in here, I got a gap. It's the same thing on the other side. I got a little gap. Yeah, I can put in some wood filler, or I could call it custom. In the end, the only things I think I added from the first one were, in the original back design, this post right here, this one, is only attached to the 2x6, and these are only attached to the 2x3, so they would they'd wobble. On my first one, I went behind there and kind of just did without the pocket hole drill, I just kind of did a pocket screw at an angle, ran it into here. On this one, as you can see, there's a gap on one, but not on the other. That's because before I put this 2x3 in, I ran a screw into here, give it a little more stability. I did the same thing on that side, only over into the right. So this piece in the middle, I don't know if you can see it, has a little bit of wobble to it. You can see it in the shadow there. It's got a little bit of wobble to it, but nothing I'm concerned about. So I added that. That's about it. All in all, it's you know, you think about it, it's sitting on 2x2s, but it's sturdy. I'm 190 so pounds. That's just the cracking and creaking from the nails settling in. But I mean, you can see here, I'm putting all 190 pounds on 3 boards. They're barely flexing. I can put them on 2 boards. They flex a little bit more, but I mean, you're not ever going to do that, hopefully. I've actually tried on the first one, I put all my weight on 1 board for a split second. It flexes, but it's strong. Now, again, that cedar, I don't know how regular pine would do. If you're just going to paint it, you can use all just regular wood. Everything here is pressure treated, except for the slats, which are cedar. In Southwest Ohio, summer of 2013, the lumber cost me about $95 for this. Depending on what you buy in terms of hardware, you can spend another, I don't know, 30 bucks or so if you get the ceramic coated screws and you know, finished nails and all the stuff that she recommends. By the time you buy sandpaper and glue and wood filler and everything else, you could spend another $30 to $50. I have to say I'm a little spoiled in that my dad owns a hardware store, so that $95 is from the orange place. My dad doesn't stock lumber, but I get all the other stuff at my dad's place. So, but all in all, I think I've got about, let's say, 6 hours in it or so, with a cleanup in between. But as you can see here, I've got a little bit of a mess to clean up. So you could do it in a day. That includes going to the store, buying it, bringing it home, cutting it all myself, and putting it together myself. I think I've got probably in total, including cleanup, probably about 7 hours into it. So take a lunch in there and do it in a one-day project, or split it up over a weekend, a couple hours each day. You have yourself a nice bench. If you had a long weekend, you could do the sectional that's on the Anna's website, which I'd like to say Anna-White.com, ANA-WHITE.com. Tons of plans. That's where I got this from. So there's the first one I built. And then I built the garbage receptacle that tilts out from there too. Excellent plans, and for free. It's pretty awesome. So thanks everybody for watching, and thanks Anna for the plans, and just keep building.